Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. AK-47. The AK-47, or AK as it is officially known, also known as the Kalashnikov, is a gas-operated 7.62 x 39mm assault rifle, developed in the Soviet Union by Mikhail Kalashnikov. It is the originating firearm of the Kalashnikov rifle family. Design work on the AK-47 began in 1945. In 1946, the AK-47 was presented for official military trials, and in 1948, the fixed-stock version was introduced into active service with selected units of the Soviet Army. An early development of the design was the AKS, which was equipped with an underfolding metal shoulder stock. In early 1949, the AK-47 was officially accepted by the Soviet armed forces and used by the majority of the member states of the Warsaw Pact. Even after almost 7 decades, the model and its variants remain the most popular and widely used assault rifles in the world, because of their substantial reliability under harsh conditions, low production costs compared to contemporary Western weapons, availability in virtually every geographic region and ease of use. The AK-47 has been manufactured in many countries and has seen service with armed forces as well as irregular forces and insurgencies worldwide, and was the basis for developing many other types of individual, crew-served and specialized firearms. As of 2004, of the estimated 500 million firearms worldwide, approximately 100 million belong to the Kalashnikov family, 3/4 of which are AK-47s. Origins. During World War II, the Sturmgewehr 44 assault rifle used by German forces made a deep impression on their Soviet counterparts. The select fire rifle was chambered for a new intermediate cartridge, the 7.92 x 33mm Kurz, and combined the firepower of a submachine gun with the range and accuracy of a rifle. On the 15th of July 1943, an earlier model of the Sturmgewehr was demonstrated before the People's Commissariat of Arms of the USSR. The Soviets were impressed with the weapon and immediately set about developing an intermediate-caliber fully automatic rifle of their own, to replace the PPSH-41 submachine guns and outdated Mosin-Nagant bolt-action rifles that armed most of the Soviet army. The Soviets soon developed the 7.62 x 39mm M43 cartridge, the semi-automatic SKS carbine and the RPD light machine gun. Shortly after World War II, the Soviets developed the AK-47 assault rifle, which would quickly replace the SKS in Soviet service. In the 1960s, the Soviets introduced the RPK light machine gun, an AK-47 type weapon, with a stronger receiver, a longer heavy barrel, and a bipod, that would eventually replace the RPD light machine gun. Concept. Mikhail Kalashnikov began his career as a weapon designer in 1941, while recuperating from a shoulder wound which he received during the Battle of Bryansk. Kalashnikov himself stated, "I was in the hospital, and a soldier in the bed beside me asked, 'Why do our soldiers have only one rifle for 2 or 3 of our men, when the Germans have automatics?' So I designed one. I was a soldier, and I created a machine gun for a soldier. It was called an Automat Kalashnikova, the automatic weapon of Kalashnikov, AK, and it carried the date of its first manufacture, 1947. The AK-47 is best described as a hybrid of previous rifle technology innovations. Kalashnikov decided to design an automatic rifle combining the best features of the American M1 and the German STG-44. Kalashnikov's team had access to these weapons and had no need to reinvent the wheel. Kalashnikov himself observed, "A lot of Russian army soldiers ask me how one can become a constructor, and how new weaponry is designed. These are very difficult questions. Each designer seems to have his own paths, his own successes and failures. But one thing is clear, before attempting to create something new, it is vital to have a good appreciation of everything that already exists in this field." I myself have had many experiences confirming this to be so. There are claims about Kalashnikov copying other designs, like Bulkin's TKB-415 or Simonov's AVS-31. Early designs. Kalashnikov started work on a submachine gun design in 1942 and with a light machine gun in 1943. Early in 1944, Kalashnikov was given some 7.62 x 39 mm M43 cartridges and informed that there were several designers working on weapons for this new Soviet small arms cartridge. It was suggested to him that this new weapon might well lead to greater things, and he undertook work on the new rifle. In 1944, he entered a design competition with this new 7.62 x 39 mm semi-automatic, gas-operated, long-stroke piston carbine, strongly influenced by the American M1 Garand. The rifle that Kalashnikov designed was in the same class as the familiar AK-47 Simonov, with fixed magazine and gas tube above the barrel. However, this new Kalashnikov design lost out to a Simonov design. In 1946, a new design competition was initiated to develop a new assault rifle. Kalashnikov submitted an entry. It was gas-operated rifle with a short-stroke gas piston above the barrel, a breech block mechanism similar to his 1944 carbine, and a curved 30-round magazine. Kalashnikov's rifles AK-1 and AK-2 proved to be reliable weapons and were accepted to a second round of competition along with other designs. These prototypes had a rotary bolt, a two-part receiver with separate trigger unit housing, dual controls and a non-reciprocating charging handle located on the left side of the weapon. This design had many similarities to the STG-44. In late 1946, as the rifles were being tested, one of Kalashnikov's assistants, Alexander Zaitsev, suggested a major redesign to improve reliability. At first, Kalashnikov was reluctant, given that their rifle had already fared better than its competitors. Eventually, however, Zaitsev managed to persuade Kalashnikov. In November 1947, the new prototypes were completed. It utilized a long-stroke gas piston above the barrel. The upper and lower receivers were combined into a single receiver. The selector and safety were combined into a single control lever/dust cover on the right side of the rifle. And the bolt handle was simply attached to the bolt carrier. This simplified the design and production of the rifle. The first Army trial series began in early 1948. The new rifle proved to be reliable under a wide range of conditions with convenient handling characteristics. In 1949, it was adopted by the Soviet Army as 7.62 mm Kalashnikov assault rifle. Further development. There were many difficulties during the initial phase of production. The first production models had stamped sheet metal receivers with a milled trunnion and buttstock insert, and a stamped body. Difficulties were encountered in welding the guide and ejector rails, causing high rejection rates. Instead of halting production, a heavy machined receiver was substituted for the sheet metal receiver. This was a more costly process, but the use of machined receivers accelerated production as tooling and labor for the earlier Mosin-Nagant rifles machined receiver were easily adapted. Partly because of these problems, the Soviets were not able to distribute large numbers of the new rifle to soldiers until 1956. During this time, production of the interim SKS rifle continued. Once the manufacturing difficulties of non-milled receivers had been overcome, a redesigned version designated the AKM was introduced in 1959. This new model used a stamped sheet metal receiver and featured a slanted muzzle brake on the end of the barrel to compensate for muzzle rise under recoil. In addition, a hammer retarder was added to prevent the weapon from firing out of battery during rapid or fully automatic fire. This is also sometimes referred to as a cyclic rate reducer, or simply rate reducer, as it also has the effect of reducing the number of rounds fired per minute during fully automatic fire. It was also roughly 1/3 lighter than the previous model. Both licensed and unlicensed production of the Kalashnikov weapons abroad were almost exclusively of the AKM variant, partially due to the much easier production of the stamped receiver. This model is the most commonly encountered, having been produced in much greater quantities. All rifles based on the Kalashnikov design are frequently referred to as AK-47s in the West, although this is only correct when applied to rifles based on the original 3 receiver types. In most former Eastern Bloc countries, the weapon is known simply as the Kalashnikov, or AK. The differences between the milled and stamped receivers includes the use of rivets rather than welds on the stamped receiver. as well as the placement of a small dimple above the magazine well for stabilization of the magazine. Replacement. In 1974, the Soviets began replacing their AK-47 and AKM rifles with a newer design, the AK-74, which uses 5.45 x 39 mm ammunition. This new rifle and cartridge had only started to be manufactured in Eastern European nations when the Soviet Union collapsed, drastically slowing production of the AK-74 and other weapons of the former Soviet bloc. Design. The AK-47 was designed to be a simple, reliable fully automatic rifle that could be manufactured quickly and cheaply, using mass production methods that were state-of-the-art in the Soviet Union during the late 1940s. The AK-47 uses a long-stroke gas system that is generally associated with great reliability in adverse conditions. The large gas piston, generous clearances between moving parts, and tapered cartridge case design allow the gun to endure large amounts of foreign matter and fouling without failing to cycle. Cartridge. The AK fires the 7.62 x 39 mm cartridge with a muzzle velocity of 715 meters per second. The cartridge weight is 16.3 grams, the projectile weight is 7.9 grams. The original Soviet M43 bullets are 123-grain boat-tail bullets with a copper-plated steel jacket, a large steel core, and some lead between the core and the jacket. The AK has excellent penetration when shooting through heavy foliage, walls, or a common vehicle's metal body and into an opponent attempting to use these things as cover. The 7.62 x 39 mm M43 projectile does not generally fragment when striking an opponent and has an unusual tendency to remain intact even after making contact with bone. The 7.62 x 39 mm round produces significant wounding in cases where the bullet tumbles in tissue, but produces relatively minor wounds in cases where the bullet exits before beginning to yaw. In the absence of yaw, the M43 round can pencil through tissue with relatively little injury. Most, if not all, of the 7.62 x 39 mm ammunition found today is of the upgraded M67 variety. This variety deleted the steel insert, shifting the center of gravity rearward, and allowing the projectile to destabilize at about 3.3 in, nearly 6.7 in earlier in tissue, than the M43 round. This change also reduces penetration in ballistic gelatin to 25 in for the newer M67 round versus 29 in for the older M43 round. However, the wounding potential of M67 is mostly limited to the small permanent wound channel the bullet itself makes, especially when the bullet yaws. Operating mechanism. To fire, the operator inserts a loaded magazine, pulls back and releases the charging handle, and then pulls the trigger. In semi-automatic, the firearm fires only once, requiring the trigger to be released and depressed again for the next shot. In fully automatic, the rifle continues to fire automatically, cycling fresh rounds into the chamber until the magazine is exhausted or pressure is released from the trigger. After ignition of the cartridge primer and propellant, rapidly expanding propellant gases are diverted into the gas cylinder above the barrel through a vent near the muzzle. The buildup of gases inside the gas cylinder drives the long-stroke piston and bolt carrier rearward, and a cam guide machined into the underside of the bolt carrier, along with an ejector spur on the bolt carrier rail guide, rotates the bolt approximately 35 degrees and unlocks it from the barrel extension via a camming pin on the bolt. The moving assembly has about 5.5 mm of free travel, which creates a delay between the initial recoil impulse of the piston and the bolt unlocking sequence, allowing gas pressures to drop to a safe level before the seal between the chamber and the bolt is broken. The AK-47 does not have a gas valve. Excess gases are ventilated through a series of radial ports in the gas cylinder. The Kalashnikov operating system offers no primary extraction upon bolt rotation, but uses an extractor claw to eject the spent cartridge case. Barrel. The rifle received a barrel with a chrome-lined bore and 4 right-hand grooves at a 240 mm rifling twist rate. The gas block contains a gas channel that is installed at a slanted angle in relation to the bore axis. The muzzle is threaded for the installation of various muzzle devices such as a muzzle brake or a blank firing adapter. Gas block. The gas block of the AK-47 features a cleaning rod capture or sling loop. Gas relief ports that alleviate gas pressure are placed horizontally in a row on the gas cylinder. Fire selector. The fire selector is a large lever located on the right side of the rifle. It acts as a dust cover and prevents the charging handle from being pulled fully to the rear when it is unsafe. It is operated by the shooter's right four fingers and has three settings: safe, full auto, and semi-auto. The reason for this is that under stress a soldier will push the selector lever down with considerable force, bypassing the full auto stage and setting the rifle to semi-auto. To set the AK-47 to full auto requires the deliberate action of centering the selector lever. To operate the fire selector lever, right-handed shooters have to briefly remove their right hand from the pistol grip, which is ergonomically suboptimal. Some AK-type rifles also have a more traditional selector lever on the left side of the receiver just above the pistol grip. This lever is operated by the shooter's right thumb and has three settings: safe, full auto, and semi-auto. Sights. The AK-47 uses a notched rear tangent iron sight calibrated in 100 meters increments from 100 to. The front sight is a post adjustable for elevation in the field. Horizontal adjustment requires a special drift tool and is done by the armory before issue, or if the need arises, by an armorer after issue. The sight line elements are approximately 48.5 mm over the bore axis. The point-blank range Battle 0 setting on the 7.62 x 39 mm AK-47 rear tangent sight element corresponds to a 300 meters 0. These settings mirror the Mosin-Nagant and SKS rifles, which the AK-47 replaced. For the AK-47 combined with service cartridges, the 300 meters Battle 0 setting limits the apparent bullet rise within approximately 5 to relative to the line of sight. Soldiers are instructed to fire at any target within this range by simply placing the sights on the center of mass of the enemy target. Any errors in range estimation are tactically irrelevant, as a well-aimed shot will hit the torso of the enemy soldier. Some AK-type rifles have a front sight with a flip-up luminous dot that is calibrated at 50 meters for improved night fighting. Furniture. The AK-47 was originally equipped with a buttstock, handguard and an upper heat guard made from solid wood. With the introduction of the Type 3 receiver, the buttstock, lower handguard and upper heat guard were manufactured from birch plywood laminates. Such engineered woods are stronger and resist warping better than the conventional one-piece patterns, do not require lengthy maturing, and are cheaper. The wooden furniture was finished with the Russian amber shellac finishing process. AKS and AKMS models featured a downward folding metal buttstock similar to that of the German MP-40 submachine gun, for use in the restricted space in the BMP infantry combat vehicle, as well as by paratroops. All 100 series AKs use plastic furniture with side folding stocks. Magazines. The standard magazine capacity is 30 rounds. There are also 10, 20, and 40-round box magazines, as well as 75-round drum magazines. The AK-47 standard 30-round magazines have a pronounced curve that allows them to smoothly feed ammunition into the chamber. Their heavy steel construction combined with feed lips, machined from a single steel billet, makes them highly resistant to damage. These magazines are so strong that soldiers have been known to use their mags as hammers, and even bottle openers. This contributes to the AK-47 magazine being more reliable, but makes it heavier than US and NATO magazines. The early slab-sided steel AK-47 30-round detachable box magazines had 1mm sheet metal bodies and weigh 0.43 kilograms empty. The later steel AKM 30-round magazines had lighter sheet metal bodies with prominent reinforcing ribs weighing 0.33 kilograms empty. To further reduce weight, a lightweight magazine with an aluminum body, with a prominent reinforcing waffle rib pattern weighing 0.19 kilograms empty was developed for the AKM that proved to be too fragile, and the small issued amount of these magazines were quickly withdrawn from service. As a replacement, steel reinforced 30-round plastic 7.62 x 39 mm box magazines were introduced. These rust-colored magazines weigh 0.24 kilograms empty and are often mistakenly identified as being made of bakelite, but were actually fabricated from 2 parts of AGS4 molding compound, assembled using an epoxy resin adhesive. Noted for their durability, these magazines did however compromise the rifle's camouflage and lacked the small horizontal reinforcing ribs running down both sides of the magazine body near the front that were added on all later plastic magazine generations. A second-generation steel-reinforced dark brown 30-round 7.62 x 39mm magazine was introduced in the early 1980s, fabricated from ABS plastic. The third-generation steel-reinforced 30-round 7.62 x 39mm magazine is similar to the second generation, but is darker colored and has a matte non-reflective surface finish. The current issue steel-reinforced matte true black non-reflective surface finished 7.62 x 39mm 30-round magazines, fabricated from ABS plastic, weigh 0.25 kilograms empty. Early steel AK-47 magazines are 9.75 in long. The later ribbed steel AKM and newer plastic 7.62 x 39mm magazines are about 1 inch shorter. The transition from steel to mainly plastic magazines yields a significant weight reduction and allows a soldier to carry more ammunition for the same weight. All 7.62 x 39mm AK magazines are backwards compatible with older AK variants. 10.12 kilograms is the maximum amount of ammo that the average soldier can comfortably carry. It also allows for best comparison of the 3 most common 7.62 x 39mm AK magazines. Most Yugoslavian and some East German AK magazines were made with cartridge followers that hold the bolt open when empty. However, most AK magazine followers allow the bolt to close when the magazine is empty. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?